Strata Group and with Heber City Council. The reason why we are having this meeting is because our Planning Commission passed with a unanimous vote recommending to City Council about the rezone to do this commercial development and some housing. And before we get to that, we wanted to have some discussion, talk about some things, kind of get some City Council input about how you wanted to go about doing this. So thank you for coming. And just another thing, this is just a discussion between us. So even though we invite the audience to be here, there really isn't going to be any comments or discussion from the audience, but we are welcome and we appreciate you being here. So this will be amongst those seating. So we have the table. So we're going to turn some time to Malcolm to get started. And does everybody know everybody here around the table?
Let's make a quick introduction if you don't mind.
So let's do it for the recording, yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, good to have it on the recording.
Yeah, Malcolm Jenkins, I'm the city planner. Let's start over here in Murphy.
Yeah, Mark Wallen with AWA.
Brett Wallen with AWA.
Stuart Adams, Terra Strata.
Debbie Maragoni, City Council.
Bryce Wilcox, City Council.
Brian Hill, City Council.
Dale Fowlers, City Council.
Jared Hancock, I'm the Public Works Director.
And Sherry Bingham, Mayor. Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for making time on an evening, especially our city council. And we appreciate you guys coming too, but more so our city council appreciate you cutting some time out for an extra meeting and looking forward to adding some clarity to the project and kind of understanding that a little bit further. So I'll run through some slides, but we'll try and just keep it pretty fluid. So if you want to add comment, there will be discussions throughout each one. We'll just have a couple slides and we're going to talk about different pieces of this so we can get started with the process. So as mentioned, we've had a proposed project for quite some time now. This is out of our fiscal impact study, but we have a commercial component you guys should be familiar with, and we have the residential component in the back, yielding 117 units. We can pull up, we can just get a site plan. I'm sure we'll reference it throughout the discussion. Let's make sure that works for us. Sorry, our IT guy came and laid waste to everything. Now we're trying to get logged back into everything.
Oh, there it is.
So here's the development proposal that we took through. You see our retail pads here, the Smiths, the Fuel Center, application for a PUD rezone. Quarter acres along this side and half acres here. It seems like at some point there was some discussion of doing some thirds here, but
There was. Yeah, there was.
Just a brief note.
Do you want to scoot around that application?
Just like here. I'll just pull this up here. The application status, at least in my opinion, we've been filming the best we can, not having done a lot of commercial. They've applied to amend the zoning. Planning Commission, during their preliminary review and considering the zoning, requested a fiscal impact analysis to help them make their decision more clearly for their recommendation. Planning Commission recommended approval with conditions. We'll talk about that kind of at the end. We'll have their motion. We can dive into that, but we really want to kind of just see what your guys' thoughts are on the project as a whole, and we can talk about the Planning Commission's thoughts on it. And then seeking approval to amend the zoning is really where we're at. So it's probably a good time to turn the time over just real quick to Terra Strata for a minute. Do you guys have any other comments on where you're at in the process? Any clarity to add to the site or anything, or high-level notes?
No, I echo the fact we appreciate people coming late at night. You know, there's lots of after-hour meetings being on the City Council. Thank you for being here. And we're very appreciative of the Planning Commission. They took a lot of time and went through a methodical process, and we're very appreciative for their unanimous vote. Our application, and you can go through some of the conditions, was, like you said, for the half acre and quarter acre, the PUD and the commercial. As they recommended it, I think they recommended mostly a PUD. So we're trying to figure out, and that had other conditions involved, senior, and so we're trying to get some guidance as to whether we continue on with the application as we had it, or whether we amend it, or how, just trying to be very respectful of the Planning Commission and their efforts, but also trying to figure out our application is how we submitted it and whether we need to modify it or not. So that's probably some of the questions we have.
Perfect. Yeah, so at a high level, that's our diligence. I think it was patio homes specifically, but we'll kind of see as I dived into a couple things here. You're kind of splitting hairs in some ways, but at the end of the day, we just need to see, what we're interested in. So we have some different zones that we have throughout Hooper, some in use, some not, some applicable, some could be. But at the end of the day, I think we can accomplish any of these that you guys are interested in. But just to give you a few high-level notes, the patio zone, from my understanding, was most what the Planning Commission did reference. You can see really the big thing here with any type of rezone is that it meets the purpose of that zone. So I've highlighted the purpose there. You guys are welcome to skim through it. But that's kind of the overarching purpose. A few keynotes, just as I read through it, was it's a 10 to 20 acre with reasonable exceptions. So that would work in this scenario, even if they took the whole thing patio. I think we're at 26, but they're not. They're buffering a little, but it fits. 40% of total acreage would be an open space. There's some discussion there, and we have some ordinance to kind of describe open space, but that's the idea. There's a 5 acre minimum. They do want a playground, pathways with benches and tables at a minimum, and then there are some discretionary density bonuses for adding potential amenities and also meeting moderate income housing. That's all ordinance based and something that the Planning Commission has mentioned as well. So that's kind of our patio zone at a high level. We also have our PUD zone, which is comparable in nature. It's not as limited to patio home development specifically, as more of a mixed use fill. So you can kind of see the definition here for our PUD zone. A few items there. I would probably, as I read through our ordinance backing it, I would describe it more in the keywords we pulled were common, open space, shared amenities. So it's going to be a little bit more like maybe something you see over here on West Haven on 4000 there. Our ordinance requires that it serves as a residential buffer to commercial, so it would be applicable in this situation as well. It's similar with density, as you saw, 6 units to the acre, patio and PUD. 40% total acreage in open space. The nice thing about this PUD is our ordinance is pretty robust in describing our residential development plan. I think that's kind of a key component as we consider this, that as we go through in any type of approval, we'll iron out the details and logistics, but we'll want to make sure that you guys are involved in building out a development plan, a development agreement, so that we all know what this is going to look and feel like and how it's going to benefit the community. Throughout that process. But another thought, and just quickly, and I'll take some time over discussion, is another one that maybe is more in use currently at a higher level. Well, we have some R4. That one's not applicable as much anymore, but we haven't done a ton of R3, but it's another one that's available to us. It has some duplex ability, 1 for every 10 homes, so 10% duplex capability in our ordinance. That could yield around 90 homes as opposed to about 117 was what they had projected. So those are the 3 that I think are applicable for the residential piece. Are there any questions for me about those 3 before we kind of turn time over to discuss your thoughts on some of these in application?
Maybe just give a commentary on it a little. Part of the challenge is the sewer lift station and trying to make it work, and so part of the density is needed to be able to, I think LRB mentioned, to be able to get enough units to try to help pay for that. It's a fairly good. They had it at 3 to 4 million. We hope it comes in at 1 to 2, but we'll have to see. But those are things yet to be determined. But trying to economically handle that is probably one of the bigger things we're dealing with, and I think that requires a concerted effort by everyone.
And I don't think that there's not precedence for doing something like a density increase for infrastructure. There's also some ordinance that I ran through today that was pretty robust. It was specific to if someone were to pioneer a vacuum station, we would consider rezones. Obviously, we're changed from vacuums. This would be the similar thought, though, right? They're pioneering a gravity bed system. But just in the spirit of keeping to our general plan, I just kind of skimmed through the development part this morning. I just kind of wanted our council to read this because I think it's important with all the work that went into our general plan in light of this. But these were a couple highlights that I think related to all these developments and how they could be beneficial to Hooper should it be something we're considering. But 80% view, being able to stay in Hooper through retirement is very important. Lends itself well to either a PUD or a patio home that they could implement a 55 plus type community or retired community. 84% consider it somewhat or very important that their children can remain in Hooper. I think affordability, whether we made it, tried to seek it through density or actually put it in place, I think, it would inherently add some affordability with some density. And then I just thought these statistics were interesting. This was done at our last general plan, but you have our 2010 numbers and our 2019 numbers. You can see that overall, Hooper's growing. As we're growing, our median age went up, our household size went up, family size went up, and we have a lot of, you can see we have a 48% of households with 1+ person and younger than 18 in Hooper. Households with 1+ person, 65+ years or older, 18% of households. And these are old, these are 5-year-old numbers, but something to consider. So I wanted to take that into consideration. So I just wanted to have some discussion with that. And like I said, we'll get into what the planning commission can do, but I wanted to hear kind of where city council thoughts were on these different developments in light of the proposal. Again, the application was for a PUD, but feel free to discuss or ask any questions about them to me or our development team that's proposing this.
But when you call me, I think you mentioned you put this at the last of the discussion for whatever reason. That's
You're
okay.
welcome to dive into anything. Sure.
So the 3 criteria that the planning commission proposed, I know one of them was no CRA.
They're right here for you.
There we go. So you're taking a kind of a real elevated look at the general plan. There's some other issues in there that I think we would need to follow as well. I know one of them is if there is a PUD development, from my understanding, that the developer is required to supply the infrastructure for that. So there's going to be a conflict there in our general plan. So you'd have to dig a little bit deeper, but I'm pretty sure that's in there. I think
in our general plan or
in our ordinances.
No.
Yeah. And then another thing, while we're talking about the general plan, I'm just bringing up so we can have a discussion, so it can be open and just hammer this
that's
out.
The spirit of it.
So I know that when the ombudsman gentleman came and gave us a presentation, he was very complimentary that we had a general plan, and he did mention that, or he actually said, hey, if you guys are going to deviate from your general plan, you need to get the public's input. I mean, he was pretty emphatic about that. So have we got that? I don't know if we've necessarily checked that box or not. So I would like to address, the 3 criteria and see what Terra Strata has to say about the 3 criteria that the planning commission. I think we start there really, because that's the roadblocks. If there are any, it's those 3 issues that they put on there.
Sure.
So rather than
So just to keep the conversation moving, and I appreciate it for sure. I'm happy, it's good to talk about all that. I'm not familiar with the PUD portion, but we'll make sure, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we'll just make sure the ordinances are followed, and I think they'll be in agreement, and we'll have to be, right? With the public input, that part's interesting. I wasn't around when this first had comment. I heard it was a lovely meeting, but I didn't get to be there. It was in planning commission. They had a public hearing. That was early in the process. I don't know. We could dive into that a little bit more too, and we'll make sure if we do open the general plan, I do think more public comment, one more public meeting is required per the ordinance. If we don't open the general plan and you amended zoning, it's up for revision. Obviously, we'll just consult with our attorneys, specifically how we need to handle that. But that's kind of my thoughts there.
I think I'll just jump in and tell you what I like about the project.
Sure.
I like the retail pads. I like that a lot. The rest, I'm not sold on. I mean, that's where I'm at. I like the smaller pads out there, and I know everything's got to support one another, and it's got to make sense financially and all that, but it's got to make sense for us too as a community. That's where I'm at. I like the retail, the pads, the enormity of the Smiths, and the residential. I'm still unsure about. So.
Just a couple comments, because I made
Sure.
some notes too with the ombudsman. So this is what they said, that a general plan is aspirational document. It is not binding, it is not law, it is a vision. And what we're trying to do with the general plan is how do we meet objectives and minimize the trade-offs? So that's what we're trying to do with our general plan. We're trying to say, okay, what are the objectives for the city? And then how do we do that and make sure that we're, having everything with the trade-offs? So I think, when we come to a general plan, it's something that, yes, and there was a lot of work that was done on the general plan, but we're really trying to make it be, what can we do best here for the Hooper City residents? And it is a vision. A general plan is a vision. Like I said, it's an aspirational document.
So maybe suggest a few things, and you guys can think about them. We read the general plan, and everybody has, and the general plan, the residential area, I think, is like acre lots, I think, in this area or something like that, or three-quarter acres or something.
That's the current, or
But,
the future.
but then the general plan also it says you got commercial along 5500. And generally, when a city does that, there's not enough volume, or you don't want it. You don't want commercial sprawl in your city, just all the way up and down 5500, because it becomes a little bit anemic. You get too many businesses, and none of them thrive, none of them do well. The traffic patterns don't work when it's laid out in 2 miles of commercial. So generally, you're looking for a commercial node, but you zone the entire road because you don't know where that node's going. The market's got to tell you where the node's going, and that's what we've done. We've worked with users, and they've done economic studies, and they say this is a good spot for that commercial zone. So when you find out where the commercial is going to be, then your general plan says that around that commercial is where you want your more dense housing. And so so you've got a little conflict in your general plan, one that says 3/4 acre lots, and one that says when you locate your commercial, that's a good spot for your density housing. So I guess you could read it either way, but I think it's pretty clear, at least the way we read it, that if you locate your commercial here, which we hope you would, you probably ought to have more dense housing around that. And that's the spot where you ought to have it. So we think we follow the general plan. We think it fits within the general plan. Probably, we don't think it needs to be amended, but that's our opinion. And we surely respect differing opinions. But then knowing that, the other challenge we had was that we're not the only potential landowner in Hooper. There's a lot of other landowners and people that want to build for their kids, or people that want to build and develop subdivisions. But in talking to the other landowners in the very early times when the other mayor was here, we met with some of the landowners, if you remember, and there wasn't enough housing units to justify a $2 million sewer lift station. And so somehow you've got to have enough units, just the math, to be able to make it work. And so what I guess my suggestion is you've hired LRB to look at the economic impact, but there are really good, smart people that know how to help with city infrastructure and how to fund it and how to make it work with projects like this. And it may not be bad to bring some of them in and let them give you some of their ideas along with LRB. And because, quite frankly, if you can't pay for the sewer lift station, the project's dead, and that's just how it is. And if it just doesn't work, you got to make dollars work in order to build something, and that's economics of whether you're building a house and can't afford the mortgage payment, or whether you're doing anything else. You have to make the numbers work, and So we would love to try to help do that, but the sewer lift station is a big challenge for the city, and it's for us too. We'd like to make an attempt to try to solve that, but the density would probably help us some, and we think it fits within the general plan, if that's at least our opinion.
We actually, and we have copies of a summary from your general plan that we provided to the Planning Commission. We'd be glad to provide that. I think for the most part, we wanted to be here to listen and hear what your concerns were, hear what your ideas are, and we truly believe it meets, just as Stuart's indicated, the general plan and pulled excerpts out of the general plan and the vision of how it fits, and as the mayor's indicated, it is a vision of.
Can I hand you that?
Yeah.
I'll take one home with them, that they need
Yeah, I was gonna say,
perspective at least.
if you have trouble going to sleep, just pick it up.
Yeah, there you go, read it up. We'll definitely dive in. Like I said, I'm not trying to beat around the bush. We have a recommendation from our planning commission. I want to dive into that. I may have just thought of it differently. It probably need to be viewed synonymously, but I feel like if we don't have a project, then I'm not as worried about, you know what I mean? Like if there's no general plan alignment, there's no interest in opening here, then I don't know, but there's two thoughts there. If you don't have a sewer infrastructure, then it's both ways. We'll definitely discuss the planning commission's conditions and have that, but I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts again more on, obviously, we might not fully know, you guys were there when they wrote a general plan, but your thoughts on the alignment with the general plan, a dense project like this in Hooper. Like I said, I kind of laid out 3 potential density ones. Any of those seem more aligned with the general plan or not? I want to know your guys' thoughts.
My thought is on this lift station. There's been others that have, every development we've had that's come in, the developers paid for that. And we know we had a person from the county come explain these different ways of creating income. But in every case, someone had their taxes increased, or someone was paying for it. In some cases, it wasn't the whole city of Hooper, but it might have been those that are within this district, those that would be using the lift station. And that's the part that I'm wondering, why should the city pay for this, or why should our residents pay for it when we individually haven't done that in the past? Whoever comes in and wants to develop something like that, they've paid for it.
Which tax mechanism are you thinking about?
She gave us 3. There was like a CRA,
okay,
which was like a taxing district, or maybe you'll have to tell me the
CRA is a tax increment. It's kind of the best way to describe it is a tax rebate. So the property taxes generated by this project would pay for those improvements.
So to give you an idea
But it would be just in that area, right?
Yes.
No, so it's the difference in tax. So I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it, and I'm not very good, but I'm going to try, okay? And then somebody else can jump in and make it better. But if the taxes on this property were $1,000 a year, I don't know what they are, but let's say they're $1,000 a year. The way it is, it stays $1,000 a year in the school district and the county and mosquito abatement and the city get their tax portion of that $1,000. And then if nothing can be built because they can't get a sewer lift station, they get $1,000 and there's no additional benefit to them. But whether it's a CRA or an RDA, redevelopment authority, they're both pretty much the same. Many times the school district or the county or whoever getting the increase will say, we think we want to see a project built because if we give up part of our tax base of the new project for 10 or 15 years. After 10 or 15 years, we get the additional tax. So let's say you built Holmes or Smiths on it, and the taxes on it were $100,000 a year. I don't know if they're that high, but it'd be ridiculous a little bit. So the difference in the 90 and the 100 is $90,000. The school district says, I'll give up $90,000 for 10 years to get that sewer lift station or get some other improvement built, because after 10 years, what do I have? I get $90,000 a year. So it isn't a tax increase, it's simply giving up the increment, the increased tax for a period of time to be able to get that tax increase forever. And am I explaining it right?
Yeah, I call it a rebate because it's a little easier
But there's no
to
tax,
understand.
there's no tax increase, it's just simply reallocating it from the county or the school district to the city for the lift station. And once that's paid for, then they get the full tax. And so that's one way to do it. And some lift stations cost $2 or $3 million, some are not that much money, but when you get one this size, it's pretty hard for a developer to take it, or other developers probably would have done it before us.
Ryan, I was gonna say, will you explain a little bit, because you've done this with the
Well,
fire.
I'm on the fire board, the Weaver Fire Board, and entities will come to our board and ask for that same thing at whatever percentage, 70, 80, 90, one asked for 100%. We thought that was crazy, but each individual board or committee of those entities, the school district, the fire board, the mosquito board, the county, all these different taxing entities, each individually have to approve that. And there's no guarantee that they're going to do that. The fire board's turned some down. We've approved some. I don't know, I can't speak for the mosquito district, and I can't speak for the county or the school district. So we don't know if they're going to approve our request for that. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a hope, I guess. It's kind of a hope that we're going to get that money allocated for that period of time. But historically speaking, the fire board has probably approved 90% of the requests that have come through us.
What's the duration?
And I didn't explain it very well because I assumed it was 100%, but almost all of them are 50 or 70%. So the school district's still getting a lot of money, but they're just not getting 100% of it, or the mosquito abatement, but they give it up for a period of time.
And the duration is different too. So the request is for the percentage and then the duration of time for that taxing to be diverted.
And that's why a development agreement's kind of a good idea, because you'd rezone it, but you wouldn't rezone it. You'd rezone it contingent upon, because nobody knows what they'll do. And if that happens, the rezone falls into place. If it doesn't happen, we don't get our rezone. So that's kind of, because you don't want to rezone something and not get something built. And we don't want the rezone if we can't build it. So it's kind of a help to both of us.
Have you guys reached out? Because I know there's several property owners there that are kind of waiting for this lift station so they can continue their development. Have you reached out to any of them for participation in this?
Two of them.
Well,
Two of them
so
came out as true.
are they willing to
Well, I think,
help fund it?
yeah,
I don't know.
I think they would pay their share, but once a commercial entity came in there, this station, right, it's a lot considerably bigger than what it would have taken. Or is it? Would that?
We've never really done anything with commercial. My understanding is like they could pioneer that, and then we would do a impact fee analysis, and they'd set a fee. So anybody, these other developers, if they want to build, they pay per lot, and that money goes back to whoever pioneered the
So one thing LRB didn't put in their study was that exactly that if there's a way to pay for the lift station, whatever our participation, we'd have to participate. The CRA would probably do something if we couldn't get to the full amount. But the city would probably own that lift station, unless you wanted us to own it. We don't want it, okay? But you would have those impact fees on that lift station. So everybody that hooked onto it would be paying the city whatever the proportionate share of their, whatever the analysis says is their share. So that would be revenue coming into the city. That would be additional revenue coming in. You understand what I'm saying? You'd have that impact fee coming in, and it would already be, if the CRA works, it may not work, but that would already have been paid for through the CRA. So that'd be additional money coming into the city that would help offset additional infrastructure improvements. So, you follow that?
Yeah, I do, except that there's additional expense, though. It's not like there's just revenue that doesn't have an expense along with that.
Yeah, some of when you set those tax increment agencies up and collect them, you're allowed. There's a 10% administrative fee that's set aside in that agency, and that would be set up. The city council would be the board or the governing board for that agency, and you would have that money would be set aside. There's also, I believe, a housing component for some affordable housing that's part of that. I'd have to look at it again, but my recollection is there's a 10% administrative fee to cover those costs that stays with the city in that process.
But again, who pays for that? We're talking about revenue that's coming in, but who is actually going to pay for it?
So the people that pay for it, the people that use it, that hook onto it. Okay.
Were you talking about the tax increment or?
Well, the tax increment, I understand.
Okay.
You know, I don't know how the school board looks at that. You know, one reason you only get, let's just say that $1,000 a month is because it's been a farm, right?
Okay.
And there's really not any type of special requirements that someone's had to take care of. You know, you haven't had to build roads through it for the farm, or, you know. So there is a special taxing, like greenbelt taxing for the county, because there's not things that you have to do to take care of that piece of ground, which all that really changes once you start developing. And now there's things that have to be taken care of, whether it's roads, sewer, water, electricity, you know. But I'm not saying, again, I just go back to the fact that it's just not clear to me why the city or its residents, now if they're going to pay this back with an impact fee that is comparable to anywhere else where they would build, then I can kind of see that. But if it's not, if it's going to be more than that because of the size of it, I'm not sure why the developer, why you're not paying for this upfront and then let the impact fees pay you back.
Probably the size of it, and maybe there's others that have been $2 or $3 million, but I'm not aware of it. $2 or $3 million. Maybe there have been.
I don't know if we've hit $2 million.
Yeah, probably $1.5 million, but that was only their development was about 45 lots, and then they have some adjacent ground that will pay impact fees they'll recoup their costs.
You know, the state of Utah has exaction laws that they've put in place because of this exact situation. In other words, the cities and government agencies can only place burdens on new development that are exactly appropriated to that development. In other words, to build a lift station that has, let's just say, it's 3 times the capacity of the project. Our project, as far as the commercial goes, has very limited impacts to a lift station. The residential would have more impacts to the lift station.
We have a couple of restrooms, no showers, no, you know.
Right.
But so and I'm not an attorney, but there's a famous case called Bambury, and it was a developer who was required to put in an oversized road in a just a project? And he said, no, it's the city. And it's the case that everybody quotes, the Utah Supreme Court ruled that developer was only responsible to pay for the what they call project costs, the costs within the project. He wasn't required to pay for the entire city's costs.
Sure.
And so that's what gave rise to impact fees, because the city said, well, I can't pay for those without extracting an impact fee, because that road is oversized, and even though it's in front of his development, other developers have to pay for that road. And so then they said, well, you can charge another developer that doesn't have an arterial road in front of them an impact fee to pay for the road in front of that developer's side. So that's what actually gave, I guess, the legal right to collect impact fees from someone. But that's out of my wheelhouse, so you got to talk to maybe your attorney and talk about that. But there are some restrictions on what you can exact from a developer. And even though some may have paid it, it probably isn't right. You probably need to be careful about taking.
Well, there was an impact study done on the one that was your.
Yeah, they just paid their portion, and then the overage, the bigger portion of it, like you're talking about, that they didn't need, they get paid back for.
So
Just a thought, a question.
we would like to go to work on this.
Yeah, so I don't know, so say just, and I don't even know if this is even a possibility, but say if it comes back and it is 2.5 million, and the most expensive one we've ever done has been $1.5 million, and that was primarily from the housing, which this, like you mentioned, the biggest component that's going to need the sewer is actually the housing. So, and Brian, maybe you could answer this, but like the CRA probably will not and probably isn't expected to cover that whole entire amount. Like I would think like maybe the CRA would cover $1.5 million of it, then we do the impact fee. So they only maybe come to the fire district and say we only want X amount. And then the other portion of it then, they do this sewer impact study, and those houses then would be paying for the additional, which is what they would do in any subdivision anywhere here in the city. So those houses are not going to be required to pay for the whole entire impact, only the impact, like you said, for their houses. So do they do combinations like that? And I thought that maybe they do, that part of it is CRA and part of it is impact with the houses. I don't know.
You'd think that about have to, right? Especially as soon as you throw the affordable housing in there. I mean, it doesn't seem right that we're trying to build more affordable housing, whether it's for people that want to retire there or young couples. And then because of the taxing, they pay more than anywhere else in the city.
Yeah, I think to answer that the best I can, I think the real challenge is the upfront funding. I think it's fairly easy to, whether you have impact fees or connection fees and so forth, as those housing units come online, that's a fairly easy thing to do. To be able to come up with cash ahead of time is the challenge. And that's the reason these taxing entities are very successful, is because it provides an opportunity to provide the funding and then allow those funds to be repaid back into the system. That's the best way I can say to state it.
Yeah.
So that's one question I would have. So how do they come up with the full funding up front when it may take 5 years, it may take 10 years whether it's through the school board or the
Typically there's a bonding, it's a revenue bond mechanism.
So it's basically taking out kind of a loan that they'll pay off with what would have been their taxes that they would have collected.
Yes.
And there's another tool out there that's called and I've never done one, but it's a PID.
PID.
And it allows, let's say, a project area to increase their own property tax and then bond against that increase in property tax and pay for the infrastructure up front, and then the property tax pays for it over time, but the people within that project are paying a higher tax. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not when you talk about affordable housing, but what we ought to do is we're trying to figure out a way to move forward, then bring the experts in, and then let you start making decisions as far as what you think is the best way, and then what we think is feasible, and how we can make it work. And that's kind of what we're trying to figure out.
So as you mentioned, if we can come up with some kind of a zoning agreement, then that zoning agreement could be dependent upon then if we can come up with some kind of a CRA or some kind of financing. And if not, then like you said, you don't want to zone it if you can't do it. We don't want to rezone it if you're not going to do it. So, but we at least have to somehow come up as a council a decision of what we even want to do, what kind of zoning would be agreeable to.
Yeah, maybe we can talk just a bit about what a development agreement is. I mean, most developments of this type, we do a development agreement with the city, and it basically outlines what you've agreed on. Okay, so what the developer is going to participate in, how it's going to get built, any conditions that would be upon it. So it's a document that the project has to live with. And so I think it's really helpful in this situation where you haven't done commercial development. It can bridge a lot of gaps, and it's a really good tool and mechanism. But I think the biggest thing for the city would be to know that if we can't comply with everything that's in the development agreement, then the zoning has really no enforceability.
And we're looking for, again, a little guidance. Before Malcolm, I can't remember who was
Brian was the city engineer.
Brian felt like there at least ought to be enough density in the residential. He thought it was an idea anyway, wasn't he? But there needed to be, where the commercial removed part of the residential density, that probably ought to be allocated to the rest of the ground. But there needs to be some resolve, because your big problem is the residential, but I understand that. But there needs to be some resolve to that residential for us to move forward. And again, our application was 1/4 acres on the west, 1/2 acres lots on the north, a PUD in the middle. The Planning Commission's recommendation was a PUD over the whole thing, I think, or something like that. And I don't want to speak for him, but that's what I heard. And
Yeah,
so,
there is
or CRA or whatever.
They recommend that the developer explores PUD and patio zoning designations, considering a 55+ community for the entire residential
For the
area.
entire-
So that'd be
So
26
if we
acres.
come back into you and with our application, which was 1/2 and 1/4 acres and a PUD, the Planning Commission might think that we weren't respectful of them and we ignored their recommendation and just came with our old. If we come in with their new recommendation, you might think, well, we've changed our mind and we're kind of not consistent. We don't have integrity. We're changing things in mid-course. And we're looking for direction so that we can be respectful of the Planning Commission and yet go through with our application. And we're kind of not knowing what to do exactly that way.
How do you feel about that recommendation from the Planning Commission?
I think a PRUD overlay is a pretty good orderly development. The 55 and older, if you looked at the data, it would be tough, I think, to market. I don't think demand would be there. But if you combine trying to get affordable housing, which if you go back to that slide that had the data on it, it'll back even to the survey. Or
Oh, there you go.
one more, where was the survey?
Or have
of the
the
general plan?
ages of us, or?
84 and 85%
Yeah,
of the
there you go.
residents.
Yeah,
But there we go,
I mean, we
that's
definitely
it.
have demand for both, that's the point. We
So-
have a large population, and actually we have kind of a smaller population of 65+, right? We have a larger population of younger families, households. So, but I mean, that was the demographic in 2019, and so there's demand for both for sure. And we do have one, we have a 55+ that done well, but there's definitely demand for both. I know that's kind of what we're talking about and we'd have to get pulse on that probably, but
If we could do both, that would be something we would, I think would be very productive. It would satisfy, I suppose, 80% of the one area and 84 in the other area, the demand. And I think it would give, usually in a PUD or a the city council usually has more oversight on it because you're approving, some of even the architecture of it. You can have that ability in a PUD.
Yeah, if you compare our ordinances, and I don't want to act like the expert, but I've read through them pretty good today and, in the past. And when you compare our ordinances, our patio home one is a little bit more limited. We could definitely do a patio home development, and you could put a 55 plus community in either. The way I read them, patio homes seem to kind of lend themselves to that better. That's kind of what we did over in Country View, but I do think we have more robust ordinance surrounding our PUD. There's more flexibility. We could maybe accomplish more, but it's just a thought. It really depends on you guys were here to build the general plan. I've read through it, but I want to make sure the spirit of it is met. So.
But I think something important that, as it relates to the PUD discussion, so one of our main intents for including the PUD in our original plan was to allow for the flexibility to meet the needs and requests of the city. So it was actually an effort on our part to allow the flexibility to figure out what the city wanted, and then to have the flexibility to make that happen without maybe some of the more restrictive components of some of the other zoning. So I think that intent maybe has been a little bit lost in some of this discussion. Is certainly another component of it was to ensure we got the density to unlock the CRA funding, but really one of the main, if not the main component, was to allow that flexibility to work with the city. And so I think we're open to, again, getting direction on what the city's looking for and then aligning to that. I think we're just trying to figure out what makes the most sense for what the requirements and needs of the project are, but also with what the city's looking for with that area.
I wanted to just kind of give my comment on a couple things. We've got our patios on, we've got our PUD, we've done some, but a PUD, I don't know if that's ever actually occurred. We also have, like I said, I think an R3 could be stretched. We'd have to get some feedback and thoughts there, but I think an R3 could be stretched. That bill's a little more similar to what Upper's done, or having done development agreements for single family home developments. And so, single family homes on a lot, they're smaller lots, but they're, third acres in nature. I guess at the end of the day, as we explore them, especially as we consider a PUD, and I just wanted you to kind of understand where staff's coming from, because we don't always get to communicate with you guys as much either. You're only here for, in and out for councils and stuff. But if we went with a PUD or a patio home, I think the development agreement's key. They're very on board with working with us to do one, but that's going to be a lot of work for the staff, which it's our job, and we're happy to do it. I just don't want to burn a lot of city resources, right? I mean, I'll be bugging Jared a lot, I'll be bugging Brandon a lot if we go down this path further, right? Well, then we'll be working with them, we'll have some work meetings like this, we'll want your involvement, etc. But I just want to make sure that that was the spirit of this, was that we have a good direction so that we don't chase our tail, if that makes sense.
Your time.
Yeah.
Right?
So, and this is new to us, right? So I think if we had really robust ordinances, that would give them some assurance. This meets their commercial development standard. They did one next door. We're doing the same thing. We're going to go put a bunch of money into developing the concept, the conceptuals, the traffic study, et cetera, et cetera. They'd go do that, bring it to us, and have pretty strong assurance of it's going to get approved. That's a little different for Hooper, right? We don't have a precedence for saying, yeah, if you meet everything, you're going to approve. We got to build that out in some type of agreement. And so that's kind of the spirit of maybe where staff's coming from with this. Just want to make sure we're putting resources where the city wants them put. So,
Can I just say, I've talked to a lot of community members, residents about this whole deal. And I guess the number one thing that gets brought up in my conversations with people is, where's Plan B and where's Plan C? Why Smiths? Why is that the only option? Why are we stuck with that idea? Why isn't there another idea? And case in point, there's a Smith's 4.3 miles that direction and another Smith's 4.5 miles that direction. So I almost feel like we put a Smith's in this spot, we're creating a monopoly for Smith's somehow, because there'll be 3 of them within 4.5 miles. People aren't excited about the Smith's idea as I talk to people. I'll be honest with you. I represent the city as a whole. Dale and I do, and people don't like the idea. I think the better idea that people would like and represent is something that stands out, that people drive to our city to come to. Like, I drive to Costco 10 to 12 miles in South Ogden because I like to go to Costco. if there was something here that people would drive 10 to 12 miles from West Haven and West Point and Syracuse to come to, they're not going to drive here to go to a Smith's, right? They're not going to drive here to go to a McDonald's. My vision or concept would be a smaller grocery store with more commercial paths, like Bryce said, some more restaurant opportunities with an open space to enjoy that space rather than just a commercial conglomeration that traffic comes and goes, but a meeting place, a gathering place where people can enjoy a meal together and have a smaller grocery store. I mean, I understand this thinking's out there. Man, can you imagine a Trader Joe's there and a 6 or 7, 8 nice little restaurants to sit down at where people would come to our community to enjoy that space from their community rather than just a drive-by, oh, let's stop at a grocery store. There's another grocery store. You know, that's the number one thing that, as I talk to people, they're not excited about this. You know, I'm sorry, but Smith's and McDonald's is dull and boring. Let's think of something that's exciting and inviting that brings people to our city rather than, oh, I could go anywhere to go to Smith's, if that makes sense. So, I mean,
I think to
so
boil
why?
that, I think to boil that down to
Why this? Where did the Smiths idea come from? Number one, why are we not entertaining another idea? Why are we stuck on that from the beginning? Why wasn't there other ideas put forth?
I think to boil that down to maybe like general plan and ordinance to make sure we're acting in the realm of, you know, 'cause I appreciate the comment and I understand it for sure.
I think what he's trying to say is you guys are negotiating the best deal for you guys.
Yeah.
And as city council members, we need to keep our residents in mind. We need to do the same. And so hopefully somewhere in the middle, we can come up with something that works well for everybody. Do we need commercial? Yeah, I agree. I think another hurdle in the LRB study, it states that for the first 3 years, you know, we'll go in the hole. And so who's going to pay for that? So the city has to, for at least the first 3 years, come up with some money out of our budget to get this thing up and moving. Is that fair? I don't know. And then another comment maybe with Ryan, have you ever, or would you be open to partner with another developer as well to help the project out? I'll just throw an idea out there. I don't even know if it would work, but I know there's a high demand for it. I don't know the economics of it, but I know Ryan Smith is offering $500,000 to build an ice rink, you know, for 20 communities. And I know people that are in that space that travel a long ways. You know, I would be inclined to give you some pretty high density to something that would be a destination, like Ryan says, a destination where people can come and recreate and spend their money, you know, on these other paths, and also live there too. Yeah, I would like to see something else as well, you know, something a little more creative, but nonetheless, that's what you guys have and are offering, and so now you wanted to know what we thought, and so now it's a little more in the open of how we're thinking as well. But yeah, we do need commercial. I totally agree, you know.
So a couple of thoughts I have. I haven't talked to anybody, but again, maybe I'm in different circles. I haven't talked to one person that isn't excited for Smith's. In fact, I spent my weekend down at the cemetery and I had numerous people came up to me that said, okay, how soon is Smith's going to be here? So I've had a lot of people that are in favor, but I'm not saying that the people you talk to aren't telling you that, Ryan. I'm sure they are. I'm just telling you the people that I'm talking to. All of you have been sitting in your positions a lot longer than I have. We have not had one other place come to Hooper that wants to come to Hooper. You know, people mentioned Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's did not want to come to Hooper. We were never ever a consideration. People threw that out there. Why aren't we getting a Trader Joe's? Trader Joe's didn't come to Hooper and say we want to come. I'll tell you, I have contacted Buc-ee's twice. If you have ever been to a Buc-ee's, it's the funnest place I've ever been.
It's a travel center.
Buc-ee's do not want to come to Hooper.
They won't because it's not on the freeway.
You're right.
We're not a travel through city.
Well, we will be. We will be when
Yeah.
West Weaver Corridor. But we're not today, you're right, we're not. So some of these places, Costco is not going to come to Hooper because Costco wouldn't even go to Washington Terrace. That mayor fought and fought for years and years to try to get Costco to Washington Terrace, and they wouldn't because it was not traveled through enough, as was on Riverdale Road. So you ask, and you probably all know this because you were here and I wasn't, when Smith's was first presented to you to come, they're the ones that want to come to Hooper. And you're right, Bryce, we need some commercial. We absolutely need some commercial. And even if there are Smiths on other places, you know, we know that's who wants to come to Hooper.
I think one way to more black and white discuss it, right? Because I appreciate the opinions and they're important. You guys are community, you represent the community. Like as you read through our general plan, the big concept, and correct me if I'm wrong, though, is local mom and pop type establishments. Especially at, I think it called out 55 and 55. You guys used to have a pizza shop down there, no, a burger joint. You had a burger joint down there. Is that right?
Had both, yeah. Had a pizza shop.
So I understand the spirit of that, and I'm not saying it's wrong. And so there could be a discussion of that. There could be a discussion of, and maybe that's more factual. Like this doesn't align with our general plan potentially, and that's probably more how I would view it. And that could be a point. But then, like you said, I don't know. Maybe I don't know when those come back, or I don't know. I'm not that.
So people tell me they don't like Smith's because it's expensive.
Uh-huh.
They'll drive by Smith's to go to Winco every single time because a necessity people want to pay the lowest price for. Groceries, food is a necessity. They don't care about the glamour. They want the lowest price, and that's not Smith's.
So your question's a really good one, and I'll try to answer it, okay? Why Smith's? Why not Associated Foods? Why not Kent's? Why not Trader's Joe? Why not Walmart? Why not whatever?
Plan B, Plan C.
And the reason is because Smiths want to come. And I haven't heard from Trader's Joe's. I've talked to them a lot. Layton, Kaysville, Riverdale. I mean, Riverdale Road they went to, and and you know why they went there. I mean, the volume. But nobody needs to talk about Riverdale Road and not know what's there. But so it's just pretty obvious. Walmart's got a project in West Haven. West Haven mayor has contacted Smith's. They've got an alternate site they'd like to have Smith's go to because they're after Walmart and Smith's. Kent is up the street. Winco's around the corner. You articulated very well the reason Smith's want to be here is this, even though it's 4.5 miles, this is a whole. The closest, they got a store in Sunset, but you've got one side of it is you 4 or 5 miles seems close, but that's the perfect spacing for stores. And if Winco were 4.5 miles away or Walmart was 4.5 miles away, they would want to be here. But Winco's a couple of miles and Walmart's got a site just up the street that they haven't built on. So the answer really quickly is just that Smiths want to be here. And so you've got a user that wants to come. Your decision is, do you want him or not? Because if there were somebody else knocking at the door, we'd like to talk to him. And if you have somebody, we'd talk to him. You're probably not going to get, and we did the Smiths in Kaysville, and I'll share with you the numbers. The guy who does Dean Storr, who does the accounting for Kaysville, gave me their numbers, and he gave me the numbers for Bowman's and for Smith's. I probably don't want to give them out in a public meeting, but I can tell you that Smith's was probably triple Bowman's as far as tax revenue. And I don't know what kind of tax revenue you get off an ice rink, but it may be good. I don't know. You just have to look to see what revenues you want in the city and what you're trying to accomplish. But the bottom line is Smiths want to be here, and there's only so many grocery stores in the market. Winco, Associated Foods, and Walmart are pretty much it. And if you don't have a Walmart, you don't have an Associated Food, you don't have a Winco that want to be here, maybe Trader Joe's, but they're not coming. So you got Smith's, and you can look at it as a good or a bad thing, but they want to be here, and that's why we're knocking on the door.
Well, I think just for the sake of, the city's standpoint, right, it's not Smith's, it's our zoning that you guys have created, right? We want to stay true potentially to our zoning, and that can be the discussion of man, it's also the general plan, right? What we've envisioned that is normally supported by our zoning. So is it C1, is it C2? That's the discussion, right? C1's more local, mom and pop, C2's more, you get what I'm saying. So that's, I don't care if it's Smith's or Walmart, it doesn't matter to me, it's just if it meets the spirit of your general plan and you guys, both represent. But again, I don't.
Well, and you can do anything with the general plan. If you've got a concept that you like and the citizens like, the general plan, the sky's the limit. We can adapt to the general plan. It's just, do we have a concept that we like?
For sure. For sure.
It's a very good question.
Yeah, that's where we're at. For sure, that's the discussion. I guess if you guys are good on kind of that portion, we could dive into a little bit more though on, that meets the general plan. And again, I agree we could adapt the general plan, we cannot, but I think the general plan really gives us our basis for what we approve as a city or not, right? Like I do the developments, I'll leave it Jared. Well, if someone comes in and they have the right for the general plan to do something, they're doing it, and that's what you guys have represented is okay in the city. Well, that's kind of where we're here. This is, determining, is the general plan what represents the city right now, or is it something we want to consider more? But we can have more discussion there, but also we could dive in and just kind of read through these real quick. We only have about 20 more minutes, then we could have a little Q&A as well, just get at the end of the board. But I don't know, did we want to go through these a little bit more? Is that helpful, or do you feel like we've hit them pretty good?
I think we've hit them.
You think you've hit them pretty comfortably? The different conditions. I mean, we really talked the CRA pretty thoroughly. We didn't mention anything about an anchor store being complete before residential units. I think that's, it comes from our planning commission. I think it'd be pretty pertinent that you guys flesh that out at least a little bit in discussion. And again, I know it's not, but.
So is that, you tell us, is that reality?
That'd be really hard to do. I think we do it simultaneous. We're not trying to build the residential without the commercial, or the commercial without the residential, but you've got to have your roads, your sewer, everything else function together, your utilities, your infrastructure, and you've got to be able to find a way to financially make it work. And without doing them together, I think financially that would be hard to do, just to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think
I don't know if you guys have a discussion with the planning commission having, what the spirit of that was. I mean, there's some logic there.
Well, I think the logic is just perception is you go in and rezone that to residential and you get that all done, and then Smith says, I'm sorry, we can't do it, it's not going to work. And then we're stuck with, so that's I think that was the thought process by putting that in there. I don't know, but I think.
Would there be some reasonable milestones on both sides you could put in the developer's agreement?
absolutely.
I think that's the way to handle
But
that.
to have a hard line would be hard, but to have the milestones, yeah. I think we know our intent. The intent is to do both.
You feel like, kind of flesh that out a little more, Jared, so we'd have our developers agreement, we'd have our residential piece, we'd have our commercial.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of the infrastructure will have to happen to support either. Maybe you phase the development and say you need to have phase 1 done and then so much of the commercial to get phase 2. I think there's a number of ways you could work out the timing of it.
Most communities, once we have plans in to build the commercial, so once the anchor comes in, they know that you're going to have a commercial development. You're going to get what you're looking for. Typically, that's kind of the trigger. Is once you know that you've got plans in, then you proceed with building permits for both, so you can build them at the same time.
It's kind of the general fear that come in, build all the residential, get the density, and then never mind on the Smiths. Is that kind of
So you kind of have a leveling factor, and we talk too much about it maybe, but it is the challenge is the sewer lift station. And you're going to have both to pay for it. I mean, whether you put it in a development agreement or not, the economics have to be there. And the commercial will have a tough time without the residential. They can't. You can't burden a commercial. Even LRB told me that. And same with the residential. There's no way to put 20 acres of residential in and get it to the lift station to pay for. So I mean, that lift station is going to be the deciding factor as to whether how it goes in and what happens. And that's probably the thing we're going to have to work the most on. Okay,
And the bad part, it has to be functional before even one unit can be.
that's exactly right. So you're going to have both. And but I think to say you're going to do the commercial and then start on the residential, that just economically doesn't make sense. Okay.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, you'd never say never, right? But it's highly unlikely that Smiths would decide not to come in, right? The amount of work and effort that it takes to get these projects set up and ready to go, it would take some cataclysmic event or equivalent to cause something like that to not happen. So, as much as that, for what it is worth, Brad's worked with Smiths for decades now, and these projects are, when they're committed. So we're totally open to talking through phases and things like that, but it's extremely unlikely, not impossible, because everything's always possible, but extremely unlikely that Smiths, for whatever reason, barring a catastrophic event, would say, yeah, we're just not interested anymore. So.
Do any of you have any thoughts as far as what you'd like to see with the housing? No one really gave any suggestions, like as far as...
To be sure different than anything we've done in the past, right?
I think our 55-plus community patio homes have been highly successful and popular. It's built out.
Do you guys
People
think
are
there's
happy.
enough demand? I don't know. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. Do you think there's enough demand, like you mentioned?
They're all sold. They're all lived in.
Those
But
ones are also.
demand is pretty quick once they built the
There's a
different
multi-
phases.
How many would we be looking at? It'd be about 90, right?
For this deal?
Yeah.
I don't
I think it's 90. We've got 40 at Country View. That'd give us 130. It's something I could definitely look into as well, send an email, but it's great.
I think it's 20, I think the max is 20 acres.
This would be about 120 patio homes then.
So some of
versus
that other,
commercial.
I think you guys have 26 acres to deal with. So
Yeah, they do.
Zombie Road, so something else would have to, whether it's open space or, I don't know. But
Yeah, if you guys are comfortable with that assumption, run with it. I would definitely look at the higher level Hooper data. I'm from Plain City, right? I live in Plain City. We have 155 plus community, and that's all as well. And I haven't heard talk some more, but maybe I don't know. Maybe there's more demand than that, but I think we could definitely pull the data and get more comfortable with it.
They're quiet. They're well maintained.
Yeah.
People enjoy the community and their neighbors. I like them.
They're good
Yeah,
neighbors.
I understand the draw for them.
So, one thing that I know the community around this area, I know that they've talked about, up next to their spaces, they would like to see comparable spaces next to them. So like if they're on a third acre, they would like to see along their area, third acres as well, or half acres or something like that up along the north edge, just to kind of have a buffer zone, so to speak, against the higher density housing.
That's how it's planned out.
Yeah,
Is
that's
it?
how it's planned.
Okay,
That's
I
how,
thought it
that's
was
how we
quarter
submit.
acres.
That's how we originally submitted it.
Did ya?
But then the planning commission, as I understand it, I don't want to speak for them, but as I understand what they said, was that the brown and the blue, they wanted green, basically planned
Quarter
unit development.
acres?
No, planned
No.
unit development.
Oh,
They
okay.
wanted the whole thing planned unit.
So there wouldn't be
There wouldn't be the buffer. So that's the question.
That's been the planning
That's one of the
commission. They
reasons why
mentioned
we're
that
having a
some
work meeting.
It is important to note, right, with the planning commission, I was in the meeting, it was like 3 people for, one portion, 3 for another. The motion did carry it unanimously, I believe, for what was the one we read here, but, that was staff, it was way before me. I went back through, this was Brian, a little bit of Jared, a little bit of, I don't know who was mayor at the time, but that was some staff recommendation. I would hope you take them synonymously, because I think it's a good idea. The buffer sounds logical.
Yeah,
but-
because I saw the quarter acres and stuff. They would just like the
And
little
we agreed to
bigger.
go third acres if they wanted on that way. That's where the discussion was. In the planning commission last fall, I think somebody said, what about third acres? And we said we'd do third acres on
That's
the
on
west side.
the west boundary, huh?
Yeah,
You like the idea though of the buffer, it sounds like.
yeah. I know they were talking because they're on a third acre, and they wanted to know, is there going to be a larger space behind them, prior to the denser housing starting? And I said I thought so, but I would double check. And so this was just a little different than what I had understood. So
One thing about doing, just my opinion, if you did do, like you said, Debbie, some that are third and some that are half, does give a little mixed use. I think the patio homes are wonderful and they take care of them really well, the 55 and older. It doesn't really tend to, though, have any kind of younger families. Not even every retiree wants to live in a patio home. That if you at least had some third acres, some half acres, we could maybe get still some younger families, because like the study said, people want somewhere for their children and grandchildren to be able to live. Or unless if we had some of the patio homes, not be all 55 and older, but I think my thinking would be maybe if you did more of them 55 and had the third acre, like you said, Debbie, and the half acre, then at least that would afford to have some younger families if they wanted to, or even some older people that maybe didn't want to be in a patio home, but that wanted a little smaller lot.
If only they were affordable. There's the kicker.
yeah.
Well, and that, is something else you can work on with a developer too. Sometimes they can get a little higher density too if there are some.
Third and half acres is what I'm talking
So,
about.
yeah, Nelson Homes has some, they were in the news the other day out in, where was it?
JDZ Ranch.
In
It's in
Far-
Plain City. Well,
Plain
it's not
City.
incorporated Weaver County, but yeah.
And then there's a development in Harriman
Well,
that
it
we
became
saw.
Weaver County.
And both of those, they're trying to get under 400, which absolutely amazes me. I mean, I used to think affordable was 67,000. Now it's 400. But they're trying to hit that price
Yeah.
point. And but they probably need to do it in a PUD. They couldn't do it on a third acre, half acre lot.
But they're pulling in money from the state funds that was created for affordable housing for that project.
I don't think they got any state funds, but
It was
they
on KSL today, actually. It was the article.
did they.
It's the only project in Utah that's pulled funds from that legislation so far.
Proud City.
Yeah, they had, it's 1,000 homes, I think, and I can't remember, I think 300 and some odd had to be under 400. But that's kind of what they built out over there.
And I know we've put another $20 million in a first home program that allows first home buyers to take $20,000 and use it for their down payment or their closing costs, and or to buy down the rate. So that got funded last year. So.
And again, I think this design was us really trying to thread the needle between some of the feedback we'd heard from the city and the community of having this buffer, but also aligning to the general plan of having affordable housing, which I think you're pointing out, which is really only attainable through some smaller lots and higher density, right? So this is where we thought, okay, this is kind of the best of both worlds. We're kind of achieving the general plan with the affordable housing component, which we kind of were leaving open to, we'll let the market decide if older people want to move there, younger people want to move there. We didn't really see anything in the general plan that specifically called out like a retirement community, so we kind of left that open. But then also providing that buffer. But I think we're open to figuring out what's going to be best and what the community and the city wants. I think we're happy to figure that out.
What other questions you guys have? We have 10 more minutes. I know there's some lingering ones, so let's get them
One
on.
question, just a simple one. The darker brown there, the R2, aren't there some houses there? Is that property becoming part of the project eventually, or proposed to it?
Yeah, part of the family has land in that area, and I think and help me out, Malcolm, and the landowners are here, so they'll know more than I know, but they're divided into 3 different parcels, but the parcel on the far north, I'm not sure the frontage of it actually meets the zone that it's in, and so in order to build on it, they would need to either rezone it or alter the frontage. So that was an effort to allow them to build on their property and to be able to have half-acre zone so that they could meet the ordinances. And then we've talked to them about bringing another access through that brown onto 4700 to give better access into the project.
Yeah, that was my kind of what led to why I was curious about that. There will need to be another access there, so.
So and so that helped them with a little bit of the meeting the ordinance and you know, what they want to do. I don't want to speak for them, so, okay, they're behind me, they can.
No, there was some concern at one time that so there will not be an access. There was a concern that there'd be an access on the west side coming up through that.
Subdivision.
So, yeah, but that there is not one. Is that what, coming in from the west?
There's a stub street there.
Yeah,
but
there's
that's
a
right
street.
next to that.
Yeah, there has to be,
Yes,
there has to be one on the
Yeah.
west, and that's where the sewer and everything goes through that area, so.
But, I'd asked Jared about it, there has to be an egress, like you said, an egress and ingress, but it wouldn't be like a straight
Maybe here.
road going through, it would be more of a winding, so if it went into that, then it could be into a quiet neighborhood
I think there
behind them.
is.
To the east, it wouldn't be anything, it would just be a straight through, so.
So the advantage of the access is it splits the traffic flow. The disadvantage is it does create even though it's winding, creates a through street, so that's pros and
As long as
cons.
we take care of the truck traffic, the commercial traffic out to the main road, that should, there's really nowhere to go in there unless you're going home, so.
So we would fence the Smiths property, we always do. So there wouldn't be any traffic outside of the commercial going into the residential.
That's good.
It's all stuff we could work out in the development too, with, you know, there'd probably be some traffic considerations, some traffic studies, things of that nature, that would help us determine more, and then
Well, do you feel like as a city council, you've had any of your questions answered? We can schedule and do another work meeting with you. We didn't really ever come up with anything. What they need to know is what you would like to see them present to city council as far as what this would be. I don't know if you feel like you've had questions answered, or like you say,
Well,
we could always plan another meeting.
One thing, this is in my district, so it impacts my district greatly. Is there any way this project could be a little smaller, or does it have to be the full grandiose project?
It is kind of what it is. It's the acreage we're buying. So I don't know how we'd make it smaller. I think the landowner would like to
you mean
sell.
smaller, like, you know,
You
mean
smaller.
acreage or?
Like the commercial area, could that be
Like less,
compacted a little?
Yeah, one less pad maybe or something.
Yeah, or something, could that be just squashed a little, squished down a little bit? It's just a very large project for the area, and I know that's of great concern to a lot of my constituents, and that was just one thing I thought I would throw out there.
In the original plan, we actually showed, there's one of the family members who's here that owns the house. I don't know if you can show it there. To the west,
This one right here?
no, at the west side.
Let's see.
The acreage to the west, see all the acreage in right there? We had all that acreage included in our plan and actually showed the commercial going over, touching the
Right.
residential.
Connie's.
And, I wasn't gonna talk about her, but
Well,
yeah, it's okay.
that's okay.
But-
We all know who lives there.
But she actually, and we've actually pulled it back, so I suppose you could say that it's already been made smaller, but it probably, in some people's mind, may not be small enough, but we've made it smaller.
Okay.
Okay, that may not help a lot, but
Well, that answered my question.
Yeah, we went through quite a few conceptual designs to really optimize it and make it as efficient as possible, and I think we've done our best on that front.
we did the project in Kaysville, and this is significantly smaller than Kaysville.
Well, there'd be discussion, right, like, maybe a parking study could be merited. We haven't had a traffic engineer ever look at this. UDOT may require one regardless. If we did a parking study, that would really determine, right, I understand visually it can look crowded, but if there's a parking study, it would help us understand, circulation study. I mean, there will be a lot of discussion on how does this flow and does it work? Those are all studies we could enlist, and that I think staff would have some discussion
questions. We'd tentatively said we'd have a meeting for an hour and a half, thinking we could get through, and we're almost done with that, not meaning that we have to end right at 7:30. If you have any other questions or things you would like to discuss, this was really to give you a chance to ask them questions, you to give city council, so they have some direction which way to go.
So I'll just reiterate. So I think the residential I'm comfortable with. We've got enough flexibility. We can do something with that. So my big one now is just the CRA. Let's get creative. Let's figure out how, because I don't want to forfeit the community's taxes, because that's basically what it is. We're just forfeiting our taxes to pay for that infrastructure. Yeah, other people will benefit. The city as a whole, will they benefit? I don't know. But they're required to forfeit some of that and, possibly have funds come out of our future budget to get this project up and going. So, I don't know, put your heads together. But that's a big one for me, just funding the taxpayers. That's
The last lift station we put in was a pioneer agreement.
Yeah, pioneer agreement.
Rawson Ranch was a pioneer agreement. They paid for the entire thing.
And how would they feel,
Upfront.
like we fund this one, we didn't fund theirs? There's going to be some tension in the city if that happens. I just know it is, just because that was quite a big project for them. They flipped the bill and they're going to get paid back eventually.
Right.
So
And so I'm not. Is that a commercial or
it was a residential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long is that for? Is it 20 years? Is that what that was for?
I don't remember off the top of my head. Something like that.
Seems like 20.
I know
One thing I was thinking about, maybe I know you've already had LRB and maybe not that formal, but wondered if we met with some of these, because when we do our impact fee analysis and study, we go to the financial component of that. They may have some ideas, be able to explain this better to us. I think there's a little bit of confusion, because I was thinking about that. We want to be fair to the other developers that have just paid it and the residents who live there versus are going to live here. But maybe we're only talking about what pocket we're taking that out of and putting it back into. If the impact fee comes in and goes back to Mr. Adams as the developer, like it is in that case, what's the difference if they just paid for it and we don't exchange all that money? I think there's probably some learning to do about some of those.
So there is some other, and it's kind of, the CRA and the RDA was not allowed in residential. So the developer that came before us, if all they had was residential, they did not have a CRA or an RDA tool available to them. RDAs and CRAs have only been allowed in commercial development. And then recently, they've extended those if you do affordable housing, so they could apply to part of this, the residential side. So we can't do a CRA over the residential or an RDA over the residential. It has to be just for the commercial, unless you have affordable housing and there's really strict criteria. It has to be owner occupied and some other requirements if you do RDA or CRA over the residential. So the difference is this is a commercial project and it wasn't available to your residential user.
And that was part of the reason I asked. Is it is a little bit of apples to oranges, a pure residential project versus a commercial with some residential. So, like our project is estimated to have a net impact of $7 to $14.5 million for the city, based largely on the commercial. Versus a purely residential is not going to have quite as large of a net fiscal impact, positive effect for the city.
And that's why the RDAs weren't available for residential. They didn't want to incentivize something that didn't make revenue for the city.
Yeah. And I would encourage the council to read that LRB study. I think they do a really good job and fair job of talking through that, and they make some pretty clear recommendations on what they think is either a benefit or not to the city. I think that would be helpful to revisit.
How does that aspect work where, your project is the majority of that? That's that's a regional lift station that serves more than this property. So those other properties are residential. Do we have issues there with using a CRA? Does it have to be a certain percentage of it commercial, or?
So it doesn't affect them at all because we're not taking their tax increment. So when those developers develop and they build a $1 million house on it, that $1 million house pays $5,000 in taxes. There's no withholding of that. It's only on the commercial development where the school district doesn't get their tax for all their tax. They get some of it, 50 or 25% of it, which is more than they'd get if it was agricultural. So they actually get some benefit from it. But it wouldn't affect the residential at all, nor would it affect our residential unless we did affordable housing.
Ryan, how often did you say the fire district usually approves CRAs?
We don't see them very often. I think
Oh.
in 4 years I've seen half a dozen, maybe.
Wow,
CRAs. And do you see a different tax increment financing coming before you more, or
Different increments,
different to?
because I think we're asking for 70% on ours.
No, I mean like you're saying you see CRAs however often. You said 4. How often? Sorry.
Oh, maybe once every 6 months, if that.
Okay. Do you
Sometimes
see,
once a year.
Okay. Do you see other increment financing tools besides CRAs? No,
Just
they're mostly
CRAs.
CRAs.
Mm.
We had a meeting
But
the other
again, it's
day.
just commercial.
We had a meeting the other day on some work for Upper Water and the fire was here, and it was our fire district. So what was that, Chiefskin? I don't remember, but they were real, familiar with it and very.
Yeah, he's on their board.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. He acted like it's pretty common hat for them to get in on one of these, but.
Slaterville City asked for the last one we approved.
That's probably I'm guessing the school district is the biggest.
It is.
Kind of what they've said, yeah.
And have they been supportive in the past, the school district?
I'm not an expert at those. We don't do any of them, but we have this is one of the,
We did one in Washington Terrace recently in the school
you do
district.
more than I do.
Yeah, and the other is Stephanie Russell with the county. Has been to some of our previous meetings, and she's already indicated that county is supportive. So that's a pretty big hurdle right there.
Yeah, she said the county would participate in the CRA.
I think you may have already clarified this, but again, this CRA just involves your development. You don't reach out to other developments that's going to be using this lift station as part of that district or whatever you call it. Because that's something that I must have misunderstood when Stephanie Russell came.
You could do that. I mean, CRAs can be developed with different areas, but that isn't what we've proposed.
Yeah, and the CRA, unless there were affordable housing element, it would only affect the commercial. That's the only increment.
Just the commercial property and those homes on that,
The homes would not have their tax increment would not participate. And so, unless there was an exception made because we're trying to get affordable housing in the state. We're trying to use every tool we possibly can to try to get developers to look. And for the last 20 years, the developers haven't needed to build. First home buyer's market. No one was building the 1,200 square foot 2-car garage or even carport home because there was such a demand for the 3 and 4 car big homes that that product was not being built. And right now there's not a lot of it available. And so with the demand so high for that type of product, the price has gone astronomical. It's $500,000, which I can't hardly imagine, but it's what it is. So the efforts try to get more affordable housing, more of that, what I'd say, patio home for first home buyers. So,
All right, well, we hit time. Appreciate you guys. City Council, thanks again a lot for coming out. Appreciate it. And appreciate you guys making the drive out. And surveying of any of the surrounding cities. The work sessions they're normally about 4 or 5 deep with anything of this scale. Harrisville, Plaindale, this is kind of how we get them built out. So probably have to start implementing a little bit more of this as we move forward to really flesh things out and try and get things a little bit more built out before you guys see them. I don't want you guys ever feeling surprised, right? Or like I got to make a decision right now, and it's like, well, I don't know. I've only gleaned what I've gleaned, so we wanted it to be really transparent. So thanks again.
So I guess the question is, where would you like to go from here? Would you be interested in having another work session like this? Do you have any more information you would like them to bring? Anything else you would like to have time to look at?
Or we could make application the way we have here
Yeah.
and bring it to your next council meeting.
We can work through their application as it is. Kind of what we've done.
As this is? Because that
Well,
shows quarter-acre lots, and I don't
Yeah.
think we even have quarter-acre lots.
There's
No,
third.
we talked about changing it to third.
Yeah, we'd have to change it to third, but they mentioned they would, but, yeah, I mean, the application would kind of be what, with the recommendation from planning commission, and we'd bring that as it was, and you'd probably, yeah, I don't know if I suppose they can make some alterations based off of the recommendation, and we could build it that way.
Well, that would be kind of my suggestion, if you could, or, I'd like to see you try to do as much as you could to comply with what's been recommended to us from the planning commission. That's what they're there for. And if there's a way that could, some of those items that maybe haven't been addressed could be, I think that would be a good thing.
So would you rather have us erase and maybe on the lines, the blue and the brown, and make it all planned unit development as we come back? Or would you rather have us leave the blue and the brown, the blue be amended to third acre and the brown staying at half? That would help us with a little,
I think that.
I would say yes to that.
Yeah,
so that's a little different than the planning commission recommendation, but that's probably, and that's how we made applications, so that's how it would probably come anyway, unless we altered our application. So, because that's, okay. Do you want another work meeting, or would you like us to schedule it on a city council meeting?
So everything would stay the same,
Third acre
Except-
on the west.
except third acre on the west.
And again, we're not up to make a decision right now, but we, I need direction on what kind of work you'd like us to put into it, right? But I think we've got some, so.
No matter how we submitted it, you'd have, in our mind, and maybe not in yours, but on our mind, there are enough questions, you'd have to have a development agreement. Because there's too many unknowns as to CRA, how to fund the lift station, how to do all these things. And we don't want to spend the money without somewhat of an indication. And you don't want us there if we can't solve those problems. So it's a way to make it contingent upon some of those things happening. So regardless of what we bring you, we're not going to bring you something and hopefully get just a blanket approval or disapproval. Hopefully we have something that has some ability to
At least move forward.
move forward and to try to solve some of the problems or negotiate or figure out what you want to have. So that's, if we brought that back, you'd still have those options. It's not, in fact, we'd recommend those options.
Yeah, I think that developer's agreement's key for this project.
Sounds like we're all on the same page.
Okay.
The best we're gonna get. I'm going home.
It's good
See ya.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Honey, I didn't mean to speak. Hey, it's really hard.
Sorry, Connie.
You guys.
No, it's okay. I just didn't want to-
Thanks to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah. You guys coming in. Got my file.
How are you? Thank you.
I think we take the list and just, we treated everybody the same. We feel like we've done you something.
tell Blake that next time I see him.
So you live on a house on 55?
I think there's a couple of things like the sprinklers, if they're not right, put